Hey y'all, bet you're surprised that I'm out here torturing myself for a fifth time. Me too. But no, for real, I just got distracted with some other crafty projects that I was working on and I sort of forgot about this a little bit, but here I am on vacation with my family, hiding in the basement in the middle of the night, recording an awkward confessional for you, so you're welcome. In any case, welcome to episode 5 of my semi-coherent word vomit. And just to quickly recap, I pretty much cured my anxiety on accident, and I think you can too. So today we're going to talk about stoicism and how I was misjudging it for decades because I thought it meant something that it doesn't always mean. And then I'm going to explain how I actually feel my feelings instead of just, smarty pants intellectualizing like I always used to do. And I feel like this is all super important, so it may end up being my longest video, but please bear with me. So for the longest time, I thought that stoicism was like basically toxic masculinity wrapped up. Like never let them see you sweat, real men don't cry, shove down your feelings. It's basically like a formalized philosophy of emotional repression. And I was not here for it. Probably because as a kid, I was told that if you don't feel your feelings, you get cancer. Like literally you get physically ill. In my head, stoicism sounded like the most short-sighted thing you can do. Like if you shove your feelings down and you don't feel them, they will just chase you around and leak out in ways that you don't want them to. And last year I read this book called The Art of Letting Go. It was like, stop overthinking, stop negative spirals, and find emotional freedom. And it basically defines stoicism as focusing your energy on things you can control. I remember thinking like, wait, that actually sounds healthy. And I was actually surprised to pick up a book that was touting emotional freedom and seeing the word stoicism. I was really surprised by that because I didn't really fully understand what it meant. So that's when it sort of clicked that maybe stoicism wasn't about stuffing down your feelings, and maybe it was about learning to face reality head on, to feel your feelings, but also to accept the things that are out of your control, like truly accept them, give it up to God or whoever. So what actually is stoicism? Stoicism with a capital S is basically what I was just describing. It's about what's in your control versus what's not in your control. Whereas lowercase s, stoic, means poker face, it means emotionless, robotic. So I actually don't feel that dumb for being wrong about this because it's like the same word and it has two opposite meanings based on like a capital or a lowercase letter. It kind of doesn't make any sense. Lowercase version is the one that I grew up rejecting, but capital S, stoicism, isn't about shutting feelings down. It's about not being ruled by them. I read this other book like a few years back called The Cow in the Parking Lot. And it was about like a Zen approach to overcoming anger. Not that I had an anger problem, but I was about to get engaged and my soon-to-be fiance couldn't get a handle on his anger. And so I thought if I learn more about it, maybe I learn some more, tricks, whatever, solutions, strategies, maybe I could help, which is honestly pretty much sums up our entire relationship, but that's neither here nor there. So the whole premise of that book was anger usually comes from unmet expectations. And so if you can manage your expectations, you can sort of preempt the anger. So you kind of have to let go of these beliefs that the things outside of you are supposed to go a certain way. And once you realize that it's not within your control, then it's like, why even waste your energy blowing up about it? The analogy is like if there's a cow in the parking lot and it's blocking your car in, it's not gonna move just because you're angry. And no matter how angry you get, it's not gonna make it more likely to move. And I was reminded of that when I learned about the capital S stoicism last year, because emotions are natural. They're all valuable experiences to some degree. And stoicism doesn't say don't feel them. It says don't let them drive the car. I had to put that all into practice last year when I met someone who I like really actually believed was my soulmate. And I'll honestly say that I am as proud of this story as I am embarrassed by it, so please don't shame me. So from the very beginning, the whole thing was like so intense. Before we even met in person, like just over texting, I knew that, like not knew, I felt that there was something different about him. I even gave him my real number, like that's not something that I ever do, and we were making plans to meet up pretty quickly. I mean, it's just like a whirlwind, the whole thing. And we ended up getting in an argument over text and not meeting right away, which is a whole nother long story. But a couple months later, I had not been able to stop thinking about him. And I think I sort of built him up in my mind to be this person, right? And I don't know this person, so I absolutely made it up. There's no way for me to know that. So when we finally did meet, the chemistry was intoxicating. Like we were saying wild things to other people, like, oh, we're gonna be married this fall. Like we were moving quick, all right? Like I said, it felt like a whirlwind. But the fissures started showing quickly. Little moments where I felt like my boundaries weren't being respected, or like the energy would just like shift suddenly in ways that like didn't sit right with me. And I always want to talk these things out. I always want to lay everything on the table. I want to talk about things. I don't want to leave anything unsaid because I feel like that stuff lingers, and then that's your whole life, just, you know, regretting or resenting the people around you because you're not saying the things that you need to say. And then one day it all just came to a head, and it was so ridiculous. Basically, we were driving in the car and we were talking about something absolutely benign, like not even close to an argument, and pretty much all of a sudden the energy just shifted completely, and he was like very angry. And so then he starts yelling at me, and I can't just leave because we're in a moving car. But he was screaming at me over literally nothing and completely out of proportion, totally just, you know, destabilizing. And when it was over, there was no apology. There was no accountability. There was no willingness to repair. There was nothing. And I kept thinking, like, if he would just apologize, if he would just like understand how awful I feel and how he can't treat me like that, and, you know, then we could move forward. And I waited a few days for that, but it never came. And that was like my second like real stoic moment of like, I cannot control this man. I can't control whether he apologizes. I can't control his actions. I can't control his anger, his healing. I can't control where he is in his journey. All I can control is what I'm willing to accept. And I had spent so much time in the 2 years between my divorce and when this happened saying I'll never be yelled at again. I felt like I almost didn't have a choice but to leave. Because the two options were, do I stay waiting for an apology that's maybe, perhaps, probably never coming, or do I leave with integrity knowing that I can't build the kind of relationship I want on a foundation of disrespect, which is what we had. And just like when I got divorced, it didn't matter how much I wanted there to be another option. It didn't matter how much I wanted a different choice. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. These are the options, A or B. Pick. And it's like, why waste your time even hoping that it's something else? It's not. Stay or go is the only choice I had. And focusing on anything else is a fool's errand. And I won't lie, it was like embarrassingly heartbreaking considering, you know, that we were only together for 6 weeks. And even now there's still like some grief around it, which is so dumb, but like, it's hard to reconcile when I actually barely knew this man. And, you know, like just sort of realizing that the grief that I'm feeling isn't grieving him, really. I'm actually just grieving the made-up version of him that I had in my head that whole time before we met. But stoicism didn't numb me out. It didn't stop me from feeling sad. It just gave me the clarity to act in alignment with my values, which is important to me. Integrity is important to me, instead of wasting my energy on something truly unachievable. And making someone else act the way that you want them to act is always an entirely unachievable objective. It doesn't give you the easy way out. It gently reminds you to carry what's yours to carry and put down the rest. Because this man is on his own journey and his own timeline, and who the fuck am I to say that he should be further along than he is? I'm only an authority on where I am. One of the biggest ways that Stoicism has helped me practically is in how I view boundaries. Most people think a boundary is telling someone else like what they can or can't do. You're not allowed to yell at me is not actually a boundary. It's an attempt to control another person. A real boundary is about what I will do in response, because that's what I have control over. You're not allowed to yell at me becomes, if you yell at me, I will leave. And when you frame boundaries that way, they actually get easier to enforce because there's not so much to think about. They're just very clear commitments to yourself. That's what a boundary is. It's a commitment to yourself. This is what I'm willing to accept, and this is what I will do if X, Y, or Z happens. And Stoicism and boundaries haven't just showed up in my personal life. Of course, they show up in my business as well. I had a relatively new employee. She had basically just finished training, and let's say she was supposed to be there at 9 a.m. and it was like 10 o'clock and she wasn't there and she hadn't been answering, and then all of a sudden she answers and she says, oh my God, I overslept. And it's like, okay, it happens. And I don't know this girl well enough to know if this is like her character, right? So I give her grace because that's my nature. And so I say, okay, no big deal. Just get here now. And an hour later, she still wasn't there. So I reached out again and was like, I assumed you'd be here by now. And she goes, oh no, I accidentally fell asleep again. I was like, okay. So I gave her another chance, in part because I needed her to work the shift, right? I said, okay, if you can get here by 1 o'clock, it'll be no big deal. And I swear to God, if she had been there by 1 o'clock, I probably would have never brought it up again. And now historically, I would have been spiraling in the meantime, actively worrying about whether she was going to make it or not, getting all pissed off at the disrespect of the whole thing, which only brings down my energy and by extension, the energy at my shop. And I'd be stressing myself out and, worrying about whether I'd have to fire her, dreading that confrontation before I even know if it's necessary. Because Lord knows I hate firing people. And it's funny because I don't necessarily avoid confrontation, but I really can't stand firing people. But this time I caught myself. I was like, I'm not the one making the decision here. She's making the decision. She's showing me through her actions how much this job means to her. And my role is just to enforce the boundaries that I've already set. It's honestly sort of easy, conceptually, And at one point she even said oh, I'd rather just have the day off and stay home. And I was like, yeah, we would all rather not be working, see you at 1, but she didn't come at 1. She didn't come at all that day. And I assumed that was going to be the last that I heard from her, because if it were me and I did something like that, I would struggle to show my face again. To be quite honest, I mean, not judging her or anything, but I don't have the balls for that. And she showed up for her shift the next day and nothing happened. And I was like, okay, well, obviously I have to fire her now. And the crazy part is it was fine. Not even crazy. Of course it was fine, because I hadn't wasted all my energy, agonizing about it ahead of time. I just knew what I would do depending on what she did. And Stoicism sort of made the whole thing so much less emotional and so much clearer, because there were no what ifs to ruminate over, because there were only 2 outcomes. Emotions are signals, and if you are ignoring them, then you're ignoring valuable information. When you stuff them down to avoid the temporary discomfort of feeling them, They don't go away, they leak out. They show up as anxiety, burnout, even physical illness. So what does it actually mean to feel your feelings? First, let's be clear about what it's not. It's not overthinking. It's not intellectualizing. It's not saying to yourself, I know I'm sad, I understand why I'm sad, and sort of dissecting the psychology of your wounds. That's analyzing. Those are thoughts. That's not feelings. That's staying in your head. Feeling your feelings has perhaps more to do with your body. And it's also not numbing. It's not distracting yourself with scrolling or drinking or food, or staying so busy that you don't have time to notice, what's going on with yourself. But it's also not indulging either. It's not ruminating over the story of what happened to you, or replaying every detail of the trauma and keeping the wound fresh and open. Feeling your feelings is about letting the emotion move through your body instead of keeping it trapped in your head. It looks more like you pause long enough to notice what's actually there. You feel it in your body. You let yourself feel where it lives in your body. You describe it. Maybe it's a heaviness in your chest or a lump in your throat. And instead of pushing it away, you just breathe and you give yourself grace and you try to speak kindly to yourself. And you allow it to exist without having to explain it or justify it or limit it. And it's brave of me to face it. That's something I love to tell myself. Most people are not brave enough to face their feelings. And so if I'm doing it, that is something I should be proud of, which sort of helps in the moment too. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up, because you have to let it peak and pass. You have to sit in the discomfort and reassure yourself that it's temporary and that it's good for you. And the wave always passes. And once it does, I can decide how I want to move forward. I don't want to make a decision when I'm in a flood of emotions. I used to describe it as a fire in my chest. Literally, that's how I felt. And you make decisions when you're feeling like that you're not going to be happy with. They're not going to be in alignment with your values. You're not going to be happy with the outcomes. You're not going to feel good about what you did in the moment, because you don't have that clarity that this can give you. Most things that are good for you are temporarily uncomfortable. Working out, eating vegetables, whatever, right? That stuff sucks, but future you will thank you. And emotions work the same way. And I mentioned earlier that your emotions shouldn't be driving the car, but they're like kids that way. You also can't shove them in the trunk. They get a seat, they ride along, we acknowledge, we protect them, but they never get the wheel. And that's what it means to feel your feelings. You let them be present without letting them take over. You don't confuse them for your whole identity. Way back in 2013, I read a Facebook post from Humans of New York. If you haven't seen Humans of New York, you should check it out. Anyway, the question was, if you could give one piece of advice to a large group of people, what would it be? And the person said, when a wave comes, go deep. And they explained, when life sends you a wave of grief or emotion or whatever the case may be, you have three options. You can run from it, try to, when inevitably it will catch up to you and knock you down. You can stand your ground out of ego, but that will inevitably fail as well. It'll come up and clobber you even more quickly. Or you can use it as an opportunity to go deep, to adapt, to let it pass over you. Going deep instead of flailing on the surface is what actually gets you through. Resisting is exhausting, and letting them move through you, that's how you get through the waves. It's not easy at first, but it does get easy pretty quickly. So to bring it all together, stoicism, boundaries, and feeling your feelings are sort of just three different ways of saying the same thing. You're protecting your peace by focusing on what you can control, your inner world, and taking action in that arena only. Stoicism isn't about being emotionless. It's about emotional honesty and responding with intention and in alignment with your values. It's about the clarity of vision that can sometimes be lost in more emotional moments. Feeling your feelings isn't weakness. It must take a lot of strength to be vulnerable enough to let them move through you, or else why would so many people be avoiding it like the plague? And giving your future self that gift of your strength and your ability to sit in that discomfort is the only way to make sure the same trauma shit doesn't control you from the shadows forever. Life's waves are coming either way, and none of this stops any of it, but that's a fool's errand. Trying to control it, trying to stop these things, that's a fool's errand. If you can muster the courage to dive deep, you'll be such a good swimmer. And, in any case, I think the next video I'm working on is going to make a list of all the books that I read and that sort of contributed to, opening my eyes to everything. I mentioned like 5 already, but there are definitely at least 10 more. So if you're picking up what I'm putting down, but you can't stand, this awkward energy that I currently am bringing to the table, you'll be able to just skip the middleman and go straight to the source yourself and read those books. But if you want the Reader's Digest version, stick around because I have a lot more to say. Okay, thanks, bye. I also just want to thank Film Cooper. It's a new YouTuber that I've been watching, and he doesn't edit out his stutters, and it's just really giving me a lot of confidence, and I want to shout that out, so thanks. Bet you're surprised that I'm torturing myself. Come on, come on. Can you relax?